Colts OTAs are a wrap, and we saw some pretty interesting things at practice over the last 2 weeks. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. Thanks for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. What up, everydayers? This is Jake Arthur from HorseshoeHuddle.com, member of the Indianapolis Colts media. And today we are talking OTAs. The team just wrapped up their 2 weeks of it. They held 2 open sessions of practice to the media, one last week, one this week. They're going to get started with their veteran mandatory minicamp next week. After that, they're going to have several weeks off until training camp starts. So this is truly a ramp-up period before their break. So I'll go ahead and kind of go over some of the injuries and main team storylines that are worth noting. We'll move on to Anthony Richardson in the offense, and then, of course, some young guys who are making plays on the defensive side of the ball. So first, I wanted to talk to you guys about one thing that really has stuck out to me is it really is put in perspective how many guys were banged up last year, considering they're all back at practice now. We all know, like, the Colts got a ton of flack, including from us, for running back like the exact same team, but it doesn't feel like the same team because they have so many guys who almost count as new because they're back from injury. So you're looking at quarterback Anthony Richardson, running backs Jonathan Taylor and Evan Hull, tight ends Jelani Woods and Drew Ogletree, defensive end Titus Leo, cornerbacks Juju Brents and Dallas Flowers, and safety Daniel Scott. And most of those guys are expected to be pretty heavy contributors. And, you know, the worst of them, special teams guys, you know what I mean? So these are, for the most part, pretty important players to get back in the lineups. Guys who have missed time, who have been out pretty much the whole time. Right tackle Braden Smith, he's still coming back from a knee surgery in the offseason. Wide receiver Ashton Doolin, who tore his ACL last summer. We haven't heard exactly when he's going to be back, but the timeline would say that he should be back during training camp. We'll probably get more on that. Probably be a good question to ask Shane Steichen next week during mandatory minicamp. Cornerback Chris Lamons has been in a boot on his left foot. And then linebacker Segun Olubi. We don't know what's going on with him, but if he continues to be out next week, we might ask about that and see what's going on with him. Those guys have not practiced during the 2 open media sessions that we have been a part of, but they have been on site observing their teammates working out. So there's at least that. Michael Pittman Jr., he was, of course, there last week, but he took a scary hit during that practice. Richardson threw a ball out to the right side, and Pittman and Jalen Jones collided, just kind of banged knees. It was scary because Pittman was just crumpled on the ground, laying down for a few minutes with everybody around him. They turned off the music there. It was silent. You could hear a pin drop. He did eventually walk off on his own, walk back into the facility. Afterward, Shane Steichen said, like, he'll be fine. They just banged knees. And then added some more clarity on that after Thursday's practice. Steichen said, Pittman is in a good spot. We're just resting him. Could he go out there and practice right now? Yeah, probably, but we're just going to be smart with him, though. So I wouldn't expect to see Pittman until training camp. There's really no reason to get him out there for this mandatory minicamp next week. Would it be great to have more reps with him and Anthony Richardson? Sure, but they're probably going to do that during the break. And Pittman has literally zero to prove to anybody, so there's not much benefit in putting him out there when he's not 100%. There were a couple guys who missed some time just for personal reasons. Jonathan Taylor was practicing last week, but he was not there this week. Steichen said he was just out for personal reasons, but nothing big. Dio Adengbo, same story. He was there last week, but not this week. He was at a wedding right now. Tight end ALIE-COX, he was there last week, not there this week. We didn't ask about that, though. when you only have a limited time with him, you don't want to run through the whole list of guys who were or were not there. But if Mo is not there next week, we'll probably figure out what's going on there. Something else worth noting. I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to like keeping my own personal depth chart and lineup for the Colts. So especially around this time, I like to start to formulate that a bit. It's a bit premature because there's so much rotating of personnel that's done that it's really hard to get a gauge on what the team is thinking. It's kind of telling which guys get reps first. Like if you rotate through 5 reps, who was the first people in there, that's kind of telling. But there's different packages and personnel groupings and things like that. So it's hard to really know. So for the most part, I don't want to make any judgments yet. There are some specifics I'll get into when we start talking individually about offense and defense. But for the most part, I'm not ready to declare starters or like significant roles yet, other than players who are it's obvious what their role is. But overall, during OTAs, this was the start of getting on-field practice work, 7-on-7s, 11-on-11s. The Colts had really good participation. There were only a few guys who were out, and it seemed like it is voluntary, of course, but you like to see everybody there. Guys who were out for, just personal stuff, life happens just like any of us with our day jobs. Like if there's something we need to go do, maybe we get PTO or take the day off. It's exactly what this seems to be. It's nothing really worth writing home about. But Steichen was really pleased with what he saw from the guys. He said, this is a good time of year to get camaraderie going, build some team chemistry. You get some guys talking trash back and forth, which he's a big fan of. So OTAs is a wrap. Really good work put in overall by the team. Here in a minute, we will go ahead and talk about Anthony Richardson and him being back on the field and how all that looked. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. Plus, with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or it's your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts that you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home some huge W's. Keep the ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. You guys been watching Fox Sports or ESPN or any of the hot take shows on your TV all day long, and you just need a break from all the yelling and just the opinions that it doesn't seem like any rational person can really agree with. We'll make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring the biggest stories without all that screaming. Again, Locked On Sports Today, also known as Lost, brings you the can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, every day or so, let's talk offense. Let's talk Anthony Richardson. Hope is back alive, everybody. So, of course, from all of our experience observing the Colts, when a quarterback season is lost to a shoulder injury, things can be pretty unchill even going into the next season. It wouldn't have been the biggest shock in the world if Richardson wasn't even ready to be on the field yet. But alas, he has done all the on-field stuff. He is there really without limitation. I mean, he's not 100% back physically to where he was before the injury, but he's getting back to it. He still can throw the ball like 60+ yards right now. He'll get back to where he was, perhaps even better than what he was because of how much specific work is going on into his passing and his body and all that. But yeah, plenty of reason for optimism. Does he look like he's in midseason form? No, not yet. Maybe a little rusty. He's got to get some work down and with timing and stuff with his pass catchers. But he also doesn't look like a guy who had season-ending shoulder surgery last year. So that's good. Plenty of velocity and zip on his balls. Even something that was noteworthy was he had a shovel pass that it just was rocketed right in there. Now, not like irresponsibly, but it was like, wow, that was really crisp, really fast. Like that play was nice. And I mean, that's just little stuff, but when you got a guy whose arm is damaged and he's rehabbing it and it's just not all the way back, like it would make sense if he wasn't there. But Richardson's arm strength now, even though it's not 100%, is still better than a lot of people. So arm looks good. During 11 on 11s, I had him charted at 8 of 11 during the 2 practices that I watched. He had some big plays, had a couple of chunk plays that were in stride to Jelani Woods and A.D. Mitchell. A couple big acrobatic catches made as well by Mitchell and Kylan Granson. Now, 7 on 7s, oddly enough, was a little more competitive with the defense, especially in coverage. Now, this is, part of it's on Richardson and having, eyes throughout the field and going through progressions and everything. But the coverage was really tight out there on the guys running routes. There was 2 or 3 times Thursday where there was just nothing open, and Richardson had to hold on to the ball and just either killed the play or dumped it off, whatever. In a normal game situation, he probably would have taken off in that scenario. But, in practice, you're trying to get as much out of it as you can. So you're going to try and keep the play alive and keep looking downfield. So defense was really competitive, making things interesting. So Richardson, I would say overall very, very promising. As we all know, I'm sure he's going to get some work in with the guys during the break and then coming to training camp, hopefully not looking like they've missed a beat. Outside of Richardson, with Taylor missing Thursday's practice, it was pretty clear that Trey Sermon is the next guy up, which Zach and I discussed that recently on our running back episode of our positional reviews. One thing that was interesting, it looked like Evan Hull has the early edge on Tyler Goodson for the passing down back. They did both rotate in, but Hull was the guy initially. That could be one that they just go back and forth and rotate between being the main passing down guy throughout each week of training camp. We'll have to wait and see on that. But Hull is certainly the guy who, they drafted in the middle rounds last year, probably had a decent expectation of him and what his role would be in the offense, but the meniscus injury kind of took his season from it before it really began because it happened in week 1. So Josh Downs, very heavily involved, especially Thursday with Michael Pittman Jr. out. He must have had at least 10 catches between 7 on 7s and 11 on 11s. Like Anthony Richardson was finding him early and often, constantly. And Downs looked really good doing it. He's a buttery smooth route runner, always seems to make the first guy miss or, kind of sneaks his way around to pick up extra, even inches. He's just a really efficient player. So if Pittman has to miss any time for any reason during the season, I would expect to see a pretty huge dose of Josh Downs. The shiny new toy, A.D. Mitchell, has done some really big things on the field. Shane Steichen has spoke really, really highly of him. Just the way that he gets off the ball and out of his breaks, and he separates and makes big plays happen. Like when the ball goes to Mitchell and it's in the air, you assume that he's going to come down with it as long as it's in his vicinity. We all saw the play from, I think, a week or 2 ago on, the Colts posted on Twitter where he beat Juju Brents deep for a ball from Richardson. He had a really nice play on a corner route over Darrell Baker Jr. on Thursday that I saw from Richardson to him downfield. Richardson found Mitchell again on another big play. I didn't see who was in coverage, but Mitchell jumped up and kind of readjusted in the air and came down with it. That's a guy who does not drop the ball, didn't in college, and so far it's been pretty smooth. He's got really sure hands and is able to make really difficult catches so far in practice. So far this has been a really good offseason for Mitchell. I know it's a small sample size, but what else can you ask for so far? He's answered the call, and he's doing it with Richardson. It's not like he's just been matched up with Flacco with the second team. Like Mitchell has stepped up, especially, with Pittman not being out there. Mitchell's getting some extra work with the ones and the guys that will really matter for his development long term. Last, looking at tight ends, it's been a pretty healthy group, with the exception of wherever Mo ALIE-COX was on Thursday. Jelani Woods leading the way. He's made at least like 3 or 4 big plays that I can recall during practice. They all involve either him being downfield for the most part, making tough catches in traffic, and or making plays where he picks up extra yardage after the catch. So the big play ability that you hope to get out of Jelani Woods has been on display during this OTA session. So that's very, very promising. Zach and I talked about where the heck do all these blocks fall with the tight end group. It's probably not going to be a defined tight end 1, tight end 2, tight end 3, tight end 4. It's going to be a group effort, and it's going to be very matchup and like role based. And, Drew Ogletree, is he going to step up and essentially replace what Mo ALIE-COX had been doing? Kylan Granson is a guy that you move around a lot and you can do a lot of things with. Woods is the one you really hope steps up and becomes your big play, main passing threat type of guy. And then Will Mallory, just take another step in your development, man. Be, I guess, a diet version of Jelani Woods. It's just good to have all those guys healthy at this point in the offseason because, this time last year, Woods was already having his hamstring issues. And then when we got into training camp, pretty much everybody except for Kylan Granson was getting hurt. So fingers crossed that this group can stay healthy and the Colts can figure out what to do with them and who fits best in what roles. Because the tight end group, it's got a lot of talent, and historically Shane Steichen has done a lot of really productive things with tight ends. So you're almost getting robbed of offensive versatility and productivity if this very talented, high-ceiling tight end group doesn't stay healthy. So again, fingers crossed that is not the case. Coming up, if any side of the ball has won OTAs, it's the defense. All right, so I think it's very this kind of follows a script every year, but the defense I feel always kind of has a leg up, especially early in these things like training camp. I feel like at least for the first handful of practices, defenses usually have the leg up because the offense is trying to figure things out. They've already started install, but you're trying to iron things out and see what works best. It's all about trying things and not necessarily being a finished product yet. So the defense just has to show up and do their job while the offense is trying to do all these things, figuring it out. Like the defense is trying to do that too, but it's just easier setup for the defense. Now, the Colts defense through OTAs has had a lot of energy and a lot of physicality, probably being more physical than they should be. Zaire Franklin straight up tackled Mo ALIE-COX on a play last week during 7-on-7s. And you've just seen some guys probably being a little more physical than they need to be. But that's this defense. They like to talk smack. They like to hit. They don't want to hurt their own teammates, but they want to season them for the regular season and let them know that they're there. But no, you expect nothing else from them. So hopefully that leads to a more productive group, a more well-rounded group, because they obviously gave up a lot of points, and the pass coverage was not really where it needed to be last year. Looking at a couple young players who made some big plays, rookie linebacker Jalen Carlisle and second-year safety Daniel Scott both had interceptions last week. Carlisle intercepted Flacco, just kind of hopped in front of the intended receiver. That was a short play. And then Daniel Scott was kind of just there at the right place, right time. Richardson threw a pass low and behind Mo ALIE-COX, and Scott was there to intercept it. Now, that's two players that the coaching staff is really high on. Wouldn't be surprised if Carlisle has a role in this defense early on in his career and during the season. Probably going to be more of a special teams player, but I do think they'd like to get him on the field at some point soon. Daniel Scott, if the battle between Nick Cross and Rodney Thomas is just a disaster, and the Colts do not feel comfortable with what they have next to Julian Blackmon, I would not be surprised to see Daniel Scott enter the discussion for, okay, do we try and get Daniel Scott in there to see what he can do next to Blackmon? Because at the very least, Scott is a super experienced, high football IQ player. Now, physically, he may not offer what Thomas and Cross do overall as athletes. But at a certain point, you just have to bite the bullet and say, we just need someone who's not a liability in the secondary. And Blackmon's not a liability, but he doesn't have the cleanest bill of health throughout his career. So if what you're doing is throwing out an adequate athlete who has a high football IQ and good instincts, and maybe you're taking a dip on athleticism and potential, I think you can live with that. Going on next, the corner, again with the secondary, we discussed safety. Nick Cross versus Rodney Thomas. So I think Nick Cross has the early upper hand. He seems to be the first guy out there at free safety. And I think that makes all the sense in the world. Thomas has had 2 years, kind of had a standout rookie year, led the team with 4 picks, but kind of took a step back in year 2, was benched near the end of the season. Nick Cross, meanwhile, earned more playing time as the season went on, was a starter the last couple weeks. So with Cross, he's always kind of been a guy who you could say raw, just like needs more experience, needs more playing time to reach his potential. If it was me, if I'm Ron Miles, Gus Bradley, and I'm figuring out, how we come to the conclusion of who is our free safety, I'm just throwing Cross out there and giving him the vast majority of the snaps at free safety throughout training camp, because you already know what you have in Rodney Thomas for the most part. Maybe him as a normal player is somewhere in between his rookie year and his second year. Doesn't matter. But if you want more productivity out of there, or you just need to know what Nick Cross is, you throw him out there and just give him the lion's share of the snaps at free safety throughout camp. Because with that, you let Cross and Blackmon learn how to play together. You get their communication down, and you get Cross the reps that he has desperately needed to become more comfortable and instinctive as a player. Because the more experience you have, the less you have to think, and what you're doing out there just comes more natural to you. And that's probably something that Cross needs. Now, is he going to be some high-end Pro Bowl player? Maybe not, but if he can give you average play to even above average play, I think you just have to throw him out there and figure it out. Because, at least at the end of it, if you've done that, you know whether or not you can move forward with him. And maybe the answer is not on the team right now. Maybe it's not Rodney Thomas or Nick Cross. Maybe you have to make it Julian Blackmon back at free safety and Ronnie Harrison is out there, or you bring in someone else like a Quandre Diggs or Justin Simmons. But you have to know whether Nick Cross is going to be that guy or not. So if it was me, again, it's not. They don't pay me for that. But I would have Nick Cross heavily involved with the first team at free safety just to figure it out. So in front of the safeties at cornerback, I think it's pretty solid that Juju Brents and Kenny Moore are your top 2 cornerbacks. When they go into multi-package sets, though, where Kenny kicks inside to the slot, it's going to be Dallas Flowers versus Jalen Jones. I think they're going to battle it out all summer for that third corner role, that outside boundary corner role, because at this point, I don't think there's any mystery that Juju Brents and Kenny Moore are starters. But they're going to let Flowers and Jones just battle it out and see how it goes for that other outside cornerback spot. Don't really know who has the upper hand on this one. Of all the position battles that I think I know what's going on, I do not have a leader in the clubhouse for that one. So I know they like both players a lot. I think they love Jalen Jones. But so far, Dallas Flowers has been given an equal opportunity from what I've seen to compete for that spot. So we'll see how it goes throughout camp. All right, so again, reminder, the Colts mandatory minicamp will be next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I'll be out there for that, bringing you content from the practice field, interviews with players and coaches. The training camp schedule, I think, should be announced sometime in the coming weeks. Normally, camp starts near the end of July, the last week and a half of July. So keep an eye on that. So you got these 3 days of practice next week, and then you're looking at about 7 weeks or so that the team will have off. They'll get their work in. Anthony Richardson will have his throwing sessions with his guys. He did that last year as a rookie. But you just kind of hope for health through all that, and that nothing itchy happens like what tends to happen with the Colts teams. This has been eerily drama-free, which, knock on all the wood, that is terrific to see and hear. From a media perspective, I can take boring as long as it means we don't have some toxic drama to report on. So I'm all good with that. So we'll bring all that to you next week. Remember that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on the Amazon Fire TV app. And Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. And of course, if you don't already, follow at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks2 on Twitter. Also, be sure to subscribe on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. We would love your 5-star ratings and reviews as well. I got Locked On Colts on Instagram and the TikTok machine recently, so please go follow those accounts if you don't already. I've been posting content to that every day, so it's well worth it. And with that, we'll see you guys next week when Zach and I continue our positional preview. Up next, it is the interior offensive line.